everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Whole Tooth, a podcast all about sharks, rays, and the run to water habitat, brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation. I'm your host, Isla, and every episode I sit down with experts in marine science, conservation, and storytelling to talk all things sharks and the oceans. Wherever you're listening from today, I hope you're well and enjoying the holidays, however it is that you celebrate them. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to mention a few things podcast related. So firstly, our next episode will be out next Thursday on the 29th, and it will be our 30th episode. How mad is that? And also our last of season 3. We wanted to end the season at the very end of 2022, and it will be with our very own CEO, Dr. James Lee, and content manager Jade Schultz. We'll be looking at everything that has happened this year for sharks, including the monumental breakthrough that happened at CITES just a couple of weeks ago. And following that, we'll be taking a little break in January as we prepare season 4 for you. Secondly, we do have an exciting announcement about the future of the podcast. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere, but we are making some changes which you'll want to be aware of, and we'll announce that in next week's episode. Okay, now that that's out the way, on with today's show. It's an episode that I've wanted to do for quite a while now because it's a topic that is very close to what I do in my other life, my scientific life, which is working with and understanding local communities, particularly fishing communities. We know that overfishing is driving shark and ray declines globally, but fishing is also a livelihood and a form of subsistence for many people. So while we do need regulations to protect sharks, we also need to protect the people who will be affected by these and engage them in shark and ray conservation in a way that is ethical, equitable, and sustainable. That being said, working with people can also be difficult, it can be challenging and hugely complicated, especially when there is many different interests involved and a lot of mistrust between scientific inquiry and local or traditional knowledge. However, local or traditional knowledge can also be highly valuable to shark conservation. In a lot of cases, we actually lack quite a lot of data on shark and ray species, on their status and how they're traded. And fishers are working with these species every single day and monitoring their movements, so we can learn quite a lot from them. And my two guests today know a lot about that. They are Dr. Nadia Rubio and Alifa Haque, two incredible researchers who have spent a lot of time in the field building trust and relationships with fishers and local communities to better understand what's happening to sharks in the area, get key data on shark numbers and distribution, and figure out barriers to local involvement in shark conservation. They talk in great detail about their research and the places they work in this episode, but I'll just give a quick overview of who they are and what they do. Nadia was awarded her PhD from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography and has spent the last 15 years as a marine ecologist studying a wide variety of subjects from turtles to whales. For her PhD, she used interdisciplinary data, including historical documents and interviews with fishers, to understand coastal exploitation in the wetlands of North Mexico. She is now founder of More Sustainable, a non-profit organisation that works to conserve marine life in Mexico's Caribbean waters, and she is also a Save Our Seas project leader. Her project focuses on documenting local knowledge of sharks and other marine fauna and combining this with spatial data to understand the trajectory of marine biodiversity in Holbox, Mexico. Alifa is also a Save Our Seas project leader, and you might recognise her voice from one of our earlier episodes, Becoming Shark Scientists, which she was on with Jasmine Graham and Dr. Catherine MacDonald. If you haven't heard that episode, it's a really great one, which covers some very important topics, so I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that. It was one of our earliest episodes. We were talking about slightly different things in that episode, but today Alifa is talking about her work in the coastal region of Bangladesh. Her project works with local fishers, conducting surveys and interviews to gain insight into the status and trade of critically endangered sawfishes and rhino rays. Through her PhD research, which she is currently completing at the University of Oxford, Alifa has built a lot of trust with fishers, which she is now using to bridge gaps between science, policy, and local knowledge to help create sustainable conservation strategies for the species. As you'll discover in this episode, Nadia and Alifa are such inspirational people with just an incredible passion for the work they do and the people they work with. It was just such a lovely experience to have them both together, bouncing off each other and sharing their stories from the field. I am so excited for you to hear this episode, so without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Nadia and Alifa, and welcome to the Whole Tooth podcast.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you both so much for coming on. I know you're both incredibly busy, as everyone is, especially with the run up to the holidays. Alifa, you are in the hand-in stage for your PhD. Nadia, you've just got back from the field, so it's all go. But we're so happy and lucky to have you on and talking about this topic, which is something that we've touched on before in the podcast, but not kind of in this way and not this detailed. And I watched you both give your talks at Sharks International, and I watched you both straight after each other, and I was like, you would be perfect for a podcast episode together. So I am so excited to have you both on. To start us off, I wondered if you could tell our listeners about the place in which the majority of your work is based at the moment and why this area is important for shark and rays. So Alifa, I'll come to you first.
Thank you very much. It's thank you for your compliments for the talks, and Nadia's too. It was a very, very good experience. My work is basically based in Bangladesh, which is at the top of the Bay of Bengal. Which is a very interesting bay. It's extremely nutrient rich because a lot of the fresh waters are coming down from Bangladesh, India, from other countries within this bay, which is for that reason, not only because of for the sharks and rays, but for many other marine species, it's an ideal habitat. So even within a very small area within the marine system, you would be finding thousands of species, fish, turtles, squids, crabs, shrimps, and whatnot. In Bangladesh alone, we have more than 110 species of sharks and rays, both marine, coastal, and deep water species. So I would say because of the habitat and the position of this place, it is extremely important for sharks and rays. Another very important thing that we shouldn't forget is that because we are a coastal country, a lot of the people are depending on these fisheries, depending on marine resources as well. So it's an opportunity as well to be able to understand not only the fish, but the fisheries and fishers and how both can coexist in an important system. So yeah.
Absolutely, and we'll talk all about that. And of course, as well, one of the species that you work most closely with is the sawfish, which is really exciting just because of the mystery around that animal. So really cool. So I'm really excited to get into that. But Nadia, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about where you work?
Yeah, so I work on Mexico. I'm from Mexico, and Mexico is important for chondrichthyan fauna. It has almost 17% of the reported species worldwide, and this is only preceded by Australia. And in the Caribbean region where I worked, about 85 species of Elasmo branch has been reported. And I work in the Caribbean part of Mexico, but I work on the islands. And so these islands have a historical culture for fishing since pre-Columbian times, but it's more recently that the culture has changed a lot because of tourism. These islands are just becoming hotspots for sun and sand tourists that come from all over the world. And so a lot of things are changing besides the problem with overfishing and coastal exploitation. The culture is changing and a lot of traditions are being lost. And so we are in this region with a lot of diversity related to sharks and rays, where a lot of anthropogenic threats are happening at a very fast phase in a very short period of time, and they're changing everything: the species composition, the environment, the culture.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think that's something that is happening in lots of places all around the world, is that tourism is definitely changing the way that things are done, and especially conservation wise as well. So that's so fascinating. I'm very excited to get into that. And also the sheer diversity, elasmobranch diversity that you have in the places that you work in is just mind-blowing to me. And such beautiful parts of the world as well. So we kind of went into that a little bit there, but I just wanted to dive into your projects at the moment and sort of talk a little bit about what it is that you do in the places that you're in. So Nadia, you were kind of just going into that, so I wondered if I could come to you first on that one.
So one of the main projects that I have right now is on Holbox Island, which is the northeast island in the Mexican Caribbean, and it's very small. And historically, it was a very tiny fishing town, which now also evolved into what I was saying, into a very important spot for tourism from all over the world. And so what I've been doing there is studying coastal exploitation through time, mainly using fishers' traditional knowledge. And so I collect this kind of information. What were they fishing? Who would go fishing, their tools for fishing. And in doing these, I also interact with an interdisciplinary team that's not only working with traditional knowledge. I interact with geographers, geologists, archaeology. So we try to make this qualitative description of coastal exploitation through time. That is mainly my work. And because I have a passion for environmental education, for interacting with the people, with the town, we do develop a lot of activities related to environmental education we try to do it with local people, and we try to do it also with broad audiences online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. It's kind of like, because I remember watching your talk at Sharks International, and I just thought it's so interesting, because it's almost like you're kind of going back through time and finding all of these little jigsaw pieces and then putting together like a big picture of kind of what was happening with shark fishing, like historically through time. I mean, I've been in the field of like social and political science for a wee while now, but I'd never seen that done before. So it was really, really fascinating to discover your work. And Alifa, of course, you work with fishers as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your research and your current project at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I think what Nadia just had said, it creates the perfect platform for it's quite similar what she has been doing. We started like that as well. A little bit of a background how our work started. So when I started working with sharks and rays at the beginning, we did not have a lot of baseline to work with. So not a lot of academic papers or even gray literature, as if not a lot of people were taking interest in this certain group of animals. So you had to start almost at the very beginning. And that was very difficult because I had a very small team. And then, if I be honest, we didn't know where to start. So the most easiest and now I think the most important way of starting was to be able to talk to the people who have a cumulative experience of thousands of years with these animals within the sea, not only in the landing sites or what we see, mostly dead sharks and rays, but with live animals as well. And that's how everything started. We started talking with these coastal people and fishers throughout with the coast of Bangladesh. And in one of my experience, it's a very interesting story. So we were talking about all species of sharks and rays, and then this trader came with a huge saw of a sawfish rostrum, which was as tall as me. And then I was surprised because we thought that we do not have sawfishes left anymore within our coastal region, and it was a freshly caught sawfish rostrum. And he told us the story about, well, we normally get a sawfish every month or the other, but it's really expensive, so you wouldn't see it in the formal landing sites. So by the virtue of this very interesting way of talking to people, which is a qualitative study, we got to know something that probably we wouldn't be able to discover in a landing site or even on a boat. And that's how our project started. So we then started to, systematically start talking to as many fishers and traders possible in the remote rivers, riverine villages and islands within the Sundarbans, which is the mangrove forest, and a very important habitat for sawfishes. And then we found out that it is impossible for someone to actually record this species if you do not have a relationship with this people, because this species do not land in the normal landing sites. So we created this fishers involved network, which was a very simple cell phone generated network whereby even if there is a fish, a sawfish is landed somewhere or being caught, they would give us the information through the phone. And using this network, we kind of found so many sawfishes that were being caught actually, and there is a possible viable population of large-toothed sawfish within our waters. And then it's while mainstreaming this local ecological knowledge into science to understand how population would look, where the species are, where their habitats are, where the most important conservation work should go, we kind of also found out that, well, we can't really stop in documenting the decline, because what we were doing back then in 2015-16, we were just documenting what's being caught, and that was important, but then again we were not really saving the species, right? And we kind of found out that then we need to understand this social and ecological and economic barriers of these fishers, for being able to release a sawfish alive, being able to adhere to conservation regulations. And that's where our current project started. We engaged with a lot of fishers, workshops. We did a lot of workshops with them, with traders, with consumers, trying to understand what would help, which is culturally appropriate for these people to be able to adhere to any conservation action. And by doing that, we are also trying to put into a lot of actions based on this research. And we have kind of had this, our first live release of a sawfish within Bangladesh. So yeah, it's interesting.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And this is exactly why I want to get the both of you on, because I think that when we're talking about sharks and shark science and conservation, a lot of people forget that there is very much a very important human element to a lot of these things, especially when it comes to fisheries and fishing. And I feel like, I mean, I was kind of similar to both of you in that I came from a biological sciences background. And then I actually fell into the world of social and political science through necessity, because you kind of realizing that you need to work with the people who are working with these animals, or trying to find these animals on a daily basis, even just to know sort of where they are and what their behaviors are doing. It's a bigger part of, you know, shark science and conservation than people, or just conservation in general, than people first imagine when they go to university, if that makes sense. I don't know if you'd agree with me, but Nadia, how about you? How did you kind of get into sort of doing what you're doing now and working with people? Was there ever a point, like Alifa just said, where you're kind of like, oh, I really need to start working with these people now?
Yeah, so it was during my PhD. It was an interdisciplinary PhD at Scripps Institution of Oceanography that they gave you the option to do a project where you had to choose different disciplines that you were interested in developing that. But many years earlier, as a very young marine biologist, before working with sharks, I worked with whales, with sperm whales and with gray whales. And that's, I'm talking about like 20 years ago. And so when I did one of my first field trips with gray whales, ecotourism in that region, which was in Baja, which was just beginning. And that was my first encounter with the fishing community that was trying to organize to become to turn into ecotourism activities with gray whales. That's like 20 years ago. And that was the first time I met a group of fishermen, and I was just enchanted by them, like by their ways, their culture. I really liked that. But at that time, I was just very focused on whale ecology. And I was just, I don't know, I just thought that was very interesting. And it was some subject I would like to explore sometime. And then I kind of put that in the back of my head, forgot about it. And then I don't know, 15 years went by and I went to grad school. And in grad school, I saw this opportunity. At that time when I was in grad school, there was this big, all these ideas that we have now about interdisciplinary work and local ecological knowledge, traditional knowledge, about kind of almost 8 to 10 years ago, they were starting to bloom, right? So it was this new line of research that it was interesting to develop. And there is where when I was in my in graduate school, when I said, okay, I think I want to do a project with fishers and coastal exploitation. And so I started with Jeremy Jackson. So he's like very important in all these world of coastal exploitation and understanding the past to get an idea of the present. And so with him, I had this opportunity to explore that part. That is how I got caught into humans and nature. And that was in the Pacific side of Mexico, in this very big wetland called Marismas Nacionales, where I did my PhD. And after that, I wanted to explore other sites in Mexico, and I wanted to go to the Caribbean. My friends that are the archaeologist team that I work with, they told me, oh, we have been exploring for several years this Mayan archaeological site, and there's an island in front of it, and this island was Holbox. You should come check it out. Maybe there you can do the kind of project that you want to do. So when I went there in late 2014, and when I saw Holbox for the first time, and when I met the fishermen, I was just saying, I need to do a project here. I didn't have any funding. I had just finished my PhD. I was very confused about where did I wanted to go to live. And at that time you're applying for jobs everywhere, for postdocs or for whatever. And I just had this feeling, I want to work on this island. I thought it was a very peculiar laboratory for these human interactions through time.
Nadia, I know that you spend a lot of time before you go into the field to collect data, for example, getting to know the community first and their traditions before you actually kind of go into the I know it's all data at the end of the day, but before you kind of specifically go out to collect data. So I wanted to know, why is it important to you to do this before you actually conduct surveys or interviews?
It's a little bit of what Alifa already mentioned about getting to know the people, right? And getting an understanding on what's going on in the community. And just because I think it also has to do with the personal relationship that you as a scientist are willing to have with your project, and the amount of interest that you want to put on the people. Because there are people that are doing these kind of projects or that are documenting human perceptions, but they're still not willing to get involved in the community, to understand what's going there, to understand the threats, to understand their concerns, to hear their voice. I do have a personal interest on getting immersed in the community and knowing their problems, the circumstances, all these more personal things that do need to be addressed. I understand it's a scientific project, but the very known story with the fishermen, they would say, oh yeah, a lot of biologists come here and they ask us questions, they leave, they never come back, we never know who they are, and they keep asking the same question again and again, and we keep responding that, and so that's it. And so I've encountered that in the field a lot, but just because I've been, for example, in Holbox, I've been working for 7 years. So I came back, right? It's a different relationship I have with them. They know me. We go back, we get information, but we also give back. And we get this, but we give it back. You do have, I think as a scientist, as a professional, you have these, you need to have this responsibility and commitment to go back. And that sometimes is not possible, maybe because of the funding, but it also has to do with your personal interaction with the community. And I think there are still scientists that believe that fishermen are not saying the truth, that believe they're lazy, that give them this other category in the social scale of unimportant. And this has to change too. And regarding, it has to do with the policies as Alifa mentioned, like these policies to regulate humans. I mean, we are 8 billion people in the planet. This is not about the sharks, about the elephants, about the tigers. This is about us. And we need to be conscious about it. And sometimes people that are very focused in the ecology or biology, it's hard, right? It's hard to get this grasp of, okay, let's look around, let's go beyond the animal, beyond the species or whatever, or beyond the ecological system, because we cannot disconnect now. We are 8 billion using natural resources. So we need it. We need the water, we need the air, we need the food from the ocean. I mean, we cannot be disconnected, and it's still not, it's not seen as that.
Yeah, such like fantastic points. You're articulating it perfectly. And yeah, I think that's one of the, because it goes way back, right, to how we're trained as scientists. We're always trained to be objective, non-emotional, all of which kind of goes against what human beings do. And obviously when you go into the field with that sort of preconceived notion of how someone thinks and how someone is going to act, you're never going to get the sort of rich and the data that you need, right? Because that person's just going to immediately shut down because they can sense that from you. And yeah, like you said, it's absolutely a two-way street. It's not just the fact of you're seeing someone as someone to get data from. You need to give something back to them for their involvement, because they're giving up their time, they're giving up their knowledge. It's such an important thing to do, but me and my colleagues have talked about this quite a lot, because we work in conflict management, conflict resolution, and these are all the things that can cause conflicts to escalate, because a lot of these people, scientists, on the one hand, scientists mistrust traditional knowledge and local knowledge, but then that's the other way around as well. So they can mistrust science and scientists and sort of what we do and how we're going to use their data and manipulate it. But a lot of us say that none of us, when we were going through university, were trained in how to speak to people in the field and how to, do this kind of thing. And it's an art form. It's, it takes, like you said, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice, like both of you said. And sometimes it can be quite hard because you're being confronted with things that maybe personally you don't agree with or are quite difficult to see or difficult to hear, especially when we're talking about things like hunting or fishing. It can be very, very different.
Yeah, and if I may just add a little bit with Nadia, I mean, it just struck me so much if anybody thinks that a fisherman is lazy or doesn't have as much of social wisdom, I mean, it's the absolute opposite. We have a 9 to 5 job. These people have a 24/7 job. And in places like ours, they go out for fishing for days without a communication device sometimes, so without any safety net, for such a small amount of earning that we can't even imagine that to be socially right. So absolutely in the contrary, for me, it's not only for the project to be successful, but even for being socially and morally just. It's absolutely important that you go without a preconceived notion to meet with these people and talk with these people. Don't have any notion that you don't know, or if you've heard for someone else. Have the same respect you would have for your colleague. Imagine how would you respect your professor in a meeting? Do the same with a fisher. It's not different. You're asking questions to both these people. You can't think of these people as, when you kind of create that balanced playing field, whereby that particular fisher also understands that the respect you get from this person is also being reciprocated. Somehow it's been, given back, as Nadia was saying. It's then the real conversation starts. Then the person actually opens up to you with their problems, with their knowledge, with their understanding. Give enough time while you're doing it. Don't think that you will be able to be finished with an interview in an hour. If you think that's how much time you have, don't rush this. And the most important thing is, as I said, it's a certain sort of I don't know if I'm articulating it very right, but it has to be extremely respectful, even if you do not understand that certain culture. Even if it goes, against what you have been believing so far in terms of social norms and everything, give time to be able to understand that some of this culture, some of these norms are going to be absolutely different from yours, and sometimes conflicting as well. It's as a person, to be able to have that very meaningful conversation, you need to come to this place whereby you're able to have this mutual respect. So this is extremely important to be able to do this.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that, that also being a woman at the field with fishermen, that's also hard because I don't know how it's in Bangladesh, but in Mexico, a lot of fishermen think that it's bad luck if you take women to the sea with you. So they wouldn't, like, if you tell them, oh, can I go fishing with you? Would you teach me? A lot of them would say, oh, it's bad luck, you don't put a woman in a boat. A lot of them no, because I've got like opposite experience with a very old fisherman that's like my father of the sea, and we would go fishing together and we would do a lot of things, and he's a very old fisherman, so he doesn't have this belief. But that is a challenge too as a woman, being accepted, right? You have to play the game somehow in a professional way, right? But that's also a challenge. Once you go through that barrier of being able to be accepted professionally as someone, they really take care of you, like they really value, they really share the information. They would I have fishermen that would call me, right, on my cell phone, like, hey, we saw these, we thought about you, and so, but yeah, it takes the time. But as a woman, it does have a different perspective for them. So but that also applies to the scientific community, which a lot of scientists are also very machistas, and so they're like, oh, what is this women doing at the field with the fishermen? I don't know if I should bring it up or not, but it's true. I mean, it's sad, but it's true, right? And then finally you're able to publish your paper, and then everyone just doesn't say anything. But it comes into these situations. It's a very multifactorial way to make these type of projects successful. It's not only about the fun thing, it's about all this world culture that we have.
Yeah. No, absolutely talk about it. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but like, yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that in both in the field and in science. And Alifa, I know that you have as well, especially with the fishers. You've had the very similar experience to Nadia, right?
Absolutely. I mean, but then again, the most interesting part was that that given time, the same fishers were the most open to me as well, as Nadia was just talking about. They would call you, WhatsApp you with shark photo. I've seen these. Have you seen these? Why aren't you here? For my PhD, I couldn't be in the field for like 6 months in a row, which is very unlike me. In those 6 months, my mom hasn't called me this times over WhatsApp. How many times different fishers did, like, hey, we have seen this, but you're not there in this place and stuff like that. So these are also little wins, I would say. I'm sure Nadia feels the same when you get such a call with something which probably not even important for your project, but then again, this relationship that you have built, you have to go about the right way to be able to bring change in bits and pieces, like in little bits at a time. And that's possible. That's what I have seen with my fishers in Bangladesh, that a lot has changed, that how they behave and stuff like that. At the beginning, as Nadia was talking about, like, for me, it was me and a very junior colleague of mine. She was just a grad student, and I've just passed my postgrad, a master's. And we used to be in the coastal areas of Bangladesh without a research question or a funding. Just being able to sit there has changed a lot for us in terms of acceptance, in terms of how we look at research questions now, even in terms of how I narrate my problems. Like in 2015, the problem I was narrating about sharks and rays was only about sharks and rays. Hey, this much is being caught, this is a problem, depletion, extinction, and all that. But now how I narrate the problem has also been changed, and I hope for the better through these experiences as well. So it's yeah, I mean, there's going to be challenges everywhere you go. I mean, I don't think there is any line of work there wouldn't be a challenge. The thing is that we need to find out a way. Either you can decide that I am going to work in this line and change this problem for better, or you can just be conflicted all the time that, hey, this is a problem, and this is a challenge. I'd always suggest that let's take the first and see how that can be changed, if change is needed at all. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a fascinating conversation. I'm so glad that I brought you both on to talk about this. I've often found too that people really enjoy being able to talk about themselves. Like once they've kind of learned to trust you a little bit, they actually really enjoy it. And then you do get people who are WhatsApping you and calling you, wanting to do more. But yeah, so how do you both kind of go about even beginning to sort of build that? We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what does your process look like of how you start to interact with people in the field and start to sort of build those relationships, like when you first go? Because I think that can be quite an overwhelming step, is how to sort of break in there in the first place.
So I take some days before doing the interviews, right? So when you go to a place you don't know very well, you have an idea of your survey, of the questions you want to do, and then everything can change. So you got to tailor it once you have some time to talk with the community. And so those first days are very interesting because I would go and look for the people I want to talk to, but it's not a formal interview. Once I met them, once we made some kind of, we made a click, right? Then I would go back with all my books or my papers that I want them to respond, but not at the beginning. And a technique that has worked for me a lot in these places where I've been going back is that I take pictures to them. And they like that. Like if I'm interviewing them at the pier or at the coastal area, so I say, okay, let me take a picture with your boat, let me take a picture. And I print them out. I've been printing so many pictures. I've interviewed over 200 people throughout these years, and I print them out. I print them out every time, and I would go back, and then I would give them, and they would be like, oh, how much I owe you, these pictures are great, or can you print me another one that's bigger for my family, and things like that. And I would just do it. It's like part of the budget in my projects. That technique has worked pretty well for me, and just being patient. And I really like that. Like I really get inspired by their accounts of how the coastal waters were and the animals that were there. And it was a hardship. There were no motors. There were not electricity. The island was completely uncommunicated. There was no road. You could only get to the island by water, and it has to be from the other state, from Yucatan. So it was a very different life, and people do not know that, and tourists are not very interested in that either. So that's really sad.
Yeah, well, you must have made like such an impression. They're obviously like really, obviously really proud of the work that they do, and having evidence of that is really validating, I guess. But Alifa, kind of similar questions to you. So first of all, sort of what does your process look like when you're trying to sort of build that trust and build those relationships with people in the field?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard, right? And it seems, and if you're an introvert person by heart, it's always like a challenge to be able to start that. But once you be able to, break that wall, I think I became really talkative after conducting all the interviews that I have been doing so far. But yeah, that's a personality change that I've seen in me. But it was very good, I hope. Well, to be frank and very honest, I think there's a reason why people do not trust other people. There can be other experiences. For example, there has been researches where it didn't came back to them in terms of what results were there, what data has been used, and how their knowledge they have given the time to these people, how they have translated to be something. It was never, it's not a practice for these people to see that. So there are historical experiences whereby these people were not taken very seriously by people like us, who are calling ourselves as researchers or conservationists. So there is a reason why this trust thing is a little difficult, and in places, maybe not everywhere, but in places it's a little difficult. So our agenda was very clear. What we did was we were absolutely transparent about what we were doing. Honesty was was very important for us. So for example, even before introducing us, we would say why we are having this conversation with these people, what would this answer, what sort of question we are asking, and what would we do with these answers? Would it bring about a new ban? Would it bring about a new regulation? Would it bring about some change? We were absolutely honest whenever we said like, hey, listen, we don't know if this is going to bring about any change or not. We were just trying to understand what's happening, and if you're happy with that, we'll be able to, voice this through your voices, in a bigger platform, maybe with government officials, with policymakers and stuff like that. And we want to put your voices in these processes of policymaking and regulation. So transparency is absolutely important. If you can really make sure that the people that you're talking to, and they believe that you're transparent and you're not here just for a regulation that would create more problems for them, it's always easier for them to talk. And how we talk about these problems is also important to these people. How you narrate your problem to these people are going to also shape how they're going to answer to you, right? If you start by something, hey, fishing is problem, because of fishing this fish has gone down, a fisher is never going to talk to you. Why would they? But the same thing, if you say something like that, hey, we know that you're not being able to catch a lot of fish, it's a problem for the fishers too, can we change this? Can we share our mutual knowledge with each other, and can find something where the fish is also safe, but you are also safe as well, so that your livelihood options are not just gone. So transparency, honesty, time, dissemination of what you have found, going back to them and arrange meetings, talk to them, give something back. What knowledge you have been producing by all those interviews. Just to make things a little lighter, I think tea is a great conversation starter.
Tea?
Yeah, invite them or be invited into their homes, whatever is more easier for them. And then just, have a lively conversation, have some tea, some snacks. There is one thing in Bangladesh which older people have, is called the betel leaf. I don't know if you know what it's kind of a leaf that people have, and that creates a certain kind of a color in your mouth if you have it. It's kind of a thing in Bangladesh, and people love to offer you that. It's not tasty at all. It's really bad, but have that with those people. So being able to be a part of that culture is extremely important. So that's how we kind of approached it, and it helped us.
I was going to ask both of you about sort of the knowledge gaps that the fishers have helped you address, and the people that you work with have helped you address, because there's still that kind of stigma about traditional and local knowledge. And Nadia, just because you were sort of touching on it a little bit there, I wondered if you could tell us, what your work, or what the data that you've got from the fishers has helped. What kind of knowledge gaps has that helped you to fill, essentially?
So with this interdisciplinary science work, we have been able to generate this qualitative description of the past of big sharks that were very common in coastal waters, and this picture has changed. I mentioned this in one of the talks at Sharks International. I mean, what is so relevant about it? And the thing that's so relevant about it is that even though like shark official information related to shark catches in Mexico has grown up, like the shark catches have increased. They have increased with small species of sharks, with the sharks that are like a meter and a half. Not the big sharks, not the tiger sharks, the great hammerheads, the bull sharks. And so we are able to do this and to describe it via all these interviews and via all these traditional knowledge and local ecological knowledge that we've been collecting through time. And that gives a very different perspective of the coastal area, of what existed there. And it also gives a perception of how human, because the fishermen would tell you that, but the fishermen are smart. They would say, we worked on kind of destroying these, right? We worked on somehow over exploiting these through time, and now we need to make this change somehow. We need to improve something. So they are aware somehow in their own reality, right, of these changes, and how these changes evolved into a negative part of the ecosystem where we're losing the trout predators. And I think and it's hard because you need to like really give a story to that qualitative information to make it serious, right, to make it robust, so it makes a strong point. And I think there is where the interdisciplinary team is very helpful, because I am a marine biologist, but I have a shark specialist that's member of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group on the team. I have the archaeologists that they've been working for over 10 years on the archaeological site near Holbox. I have the geographer, the geologist that is giving me an insight of how the landscape has changed because of construction of the hotels. So that is how the expertise of different people help you make a robust story of these, what people could just say, oh, it's a very qualitative description of things, right? I think you as an interdisciplinary scientist really need to learn how to integrate that so that you can sell your story in a serious way.
Just to give you a little bit of background to the other question that you were saying, that what sort of knowledge can be acquired from these interviews or even social work, like socio-ecological and qualitative work as well. So far in Bangladesh, we have interviewed more than, in different projects and questions, we have interviewed more than 3,000 fishers and ran over 30 workshops over 4 years of time. And we have answered different questions which could have been also done going to the sea and mapping the area. So for example, diversity of species. There were species that we didn't see, Bangladesh had. We didn't see, we couldn't record them, right? But there were fishers who were talking about species that they used to see, like the white-spotted wedge fish, which is critical endangered. We didn't think that Bangladesh had it, but the fishers mentioned that no, that we used to have it and we couldn't catch one since 2005. You should look for it. And then we went to historical data and regional data, and we found out that species was present in Bangladesh. So stuff like that. Second, habitat. So we kind of created this methodology whereby fishers identify where they fish using landmarks and grid maps, right? So using about 1,100 different interviews, we identified heat maps of where most of the fisheries are accumulating within the bay, which probably would have needed, I don't know, thousands of dollars going to the sea and then identifying where they're being fished. And when we used those maps against actual satellite data or habitat modeling data, they were exactly the same. So using fishers' knowledge to identify habitats and fishing grounds are actually very good, frugal ways of doing those sort of very important and difficult research.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just wanted to go back to something that Nadia mentioned, and I know that you're working on as well, Alifa, which is the sort of, I think a lot of people would be surprised how many fishermen and how many local communities are actually open to the idea of conservation, but there are obviously barriers to them engaging in conservation efforts, and that's something that I know both of you have looked at. And Alifa, I just want to come to you first, because I know that that's something that your work with the fishers has allowed you to gain quite a comprehensive idea of. So I wondered if you could just sort of give us an overview of what the main barriers that you have found kind of are.
So we kind of given set of choices to fishers to, kind of choose what would work better for them. So for example, would they want like a marine protected area, or, regulations or ban, or would they want mix of both, or would they want incentives and stuff like that? And that has given us access to a whole lot of things, understanding the mindset of these communities and how they approach regulations. And interestingly, we haven't found one fisher who said, no, we do not need any regulation. We just want to go and fish. Nobody actually talked about that. Everybody said, well, yes, we have experienced a steep decline of species, the target species that we catch as well, and we need to do something about it. And they identified the problems themselves. For example, fishers were talking about where their bottom trawlers would come really near shore and actually, damage the whole habitat and little fish and fingerlings and eggs, and that's why you do not have fish the next year. And bottom trawling is one of the biggest problems of fisheries, as we know, like globally, right? And then they were talking about their social barriers to be able to adhere to conservation. So for example, as an example, we took the live release of sawfish, that, well, we want you to release a sawfish alive if they're being bycaught in your net. And many of the fishers said, well, we could do it, but then again, who would make sure that we are not facing other problems? For example, we do not own the boat or net, and it is an expensive fish. And if I release it, I might lose my job. Who is going to give me a job back? Right. And then this species cost $40 a kg in Bangladesh, and their monthly income is from $100 to $200 monthly income. I mean, how to offset that? How do you offset something like that, that you are asking them to lose their livelihood on something without an incentive that would offset that problem? Not only livelihoods and this power hierarchies and stuff like that, they also do not have access to technical measures of a bycatch reduction. For example, if you need a net which is I don't know, if I may say, species friendly, wouldn't catch as much bycaught species as it is doing right now. They do not have it in the market. Where do we get that? Get that? So for us as policymakers, it's extremely easy to say, well, for the betterment of the species, we're going to ban this sort of a fishing. But then there are a few thousand fishers who are depending on these fishings but doing nothing about it. So all these kinds of barriers at the end of the day doesn't help the species, also doesn't help the fishers either. So yeah, I mean, it's just a few examples of so many different types of barriers a person has to go through before even be able to decide that I'm going to adhere to something like a conservation rule. And we as a community, unable to be able to acknowledge and help it or facilitate these things, it's not really helping the species either.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most common, well, not questions, but one of the most common comments that we see either coming through Save Our Seas or for the podcast specifically, is that we know that overfishing is the biggest driver of shark and ray declines across the world, and people's answer to that is, okay, well, why don't we just ban shark fishing? But there's so many layers and it's so complicated, and it's often not down to a fisher's like individual choice. It's not as easy for them to sort of say, okay, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore then. Nadia, how about you? What have you found? Because I know that you found that the local community have sort of, or some of the local community at least, have sort of turned to conservation a bit more, and they're starting to sort of look at that as a more viable or an option that they're sort of exploring a bit more. But I just wondered, like with the fishers as well, are you finding similar barriers to them getting involved in conservation, or is it a different story for where you work and the people that you work with?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a different story because, well, it's kind of the same but a little bit different. So the way this project on Holbox Island started is we were working with a very, very elder community. That some of them had kind of stopped fishing, where they were fishing very little, and the youngest elder community members were also turning into ecotourism for whale shark tours, whale shark swimming tours. And so it was this generation that we started studying that was kind of going away from fishing, right? So it was not this very active younger generation into fishing. And so I think that's why it was also easier for us to bond with this elder fisherman community, because they were in not really a conflict of regulations or other things. So it was more of this historical part of things. And for the case of the younger fishermen that we wanted to interview, we had a really hard time with it. They didn't want it to be interviewed. We had to modify the interview to like a more short, precise, much more less talkative interview. And we also collaborated with some local people that have been working with younger fishermen and had information of their fishing activities, because it was just, they were not willing to talk at all. it was hard. And then this elder community, we had all these past information, right? So that's it. And I think people got aware. They were aware of these of the decline in the catches, and they were aware that all these human migration happening to the island, also related to tourism, was going to change the economy, and they were going to need to find new avenues for their survival, for their socio-economic ways had to change, and tourism was a way of doing that. And I think most of the younger generations are now into tourism. There's this big problem. So the communal land on the island has been mostly sold to private investors. And so locals are kind of disappearing on the island. They're kind of moving away, and they are renting it at a very high price, or they have just sold their communal land. So everything is changing, and there is fisheries happening on the region, but it has just changed. I don't think it's like Bangladesh, where it's like intensive fishing, and it's kind of different. Even though fishing is happening, it's kind of a different story that of this evolution in the behavior from being a fisherman to being a tourism stakeholder, and from diversifying the economy. Yeah, so it's kind of a different but kind of similar story in terms of the coastal exploitation, in terms of species that were there that are gone. And in our research, we also use a lot of the traditional knowledge. We also turn it into geospatial information, and that helped us a lot. So that gave also a lot of robustness to the whole story of the presence of species in the region.
Which is really cool. And I think this is a perfect place to sort of say this is exactly why we need this kind of science, because there is no one size fits all. Even within the same country or within the same region, there's lots and lots of different context is super important. And to go back to a point that we made earlier, everything needs to be culturally, socially, politically appropriate to that area, else it's just not going to work. And the only way that we find that out is to speak to the people who are on the ground. And this is kind of like the one to sort of bring it all round and sort of finish off the podcast. But something that I hear a lot now is empowerment of local communities and bottom up approaches, which are fantastic. But something that you've said, Alifa, before, and Nadia, you also touched on as well, is the importance of true empowerment. And I wondered if we could just round the podcast off by talking about what we mean by that.
I mean, it's such a tricky question, because I am also trying to wrap my head around this whole idea of what do we mean by when we say that we are going to empower someone. And this statement by itself would give you an idea that you are forcing some sort of a power, right? When I say that I will be able to empower you, it right away takes away your power of your ability of doing something. And that's extremely problematic to me. All the community works, not all, well, most of the community works and a lot of the awareness campaigns, if you look at the pictures and if you are present in one, you would see that there are a few people sitting in a high chair, and then are a lot of the chairs somewhere in the room, and these people in the high chair are talking about what they think is important for the people who are sitting in front, and they are saying that we are going to help you to achieve those things. And that's not empowerment. That's trying to mainstream your idea of a good or better conservation or a better community or something. And that's problematic, because that takes away the power of the people who are sitting right next to you. So when I say that empowerment is important, and that's important for everyone, it's not just this communities or anything. And how does empowerment comes? It comes from self-awareness, and that there is an opportunity for you to be able to represent yourself. That's empowerment. And that can come from representing this group from a representative that comes from their community, not me. I haven't been part of this community. I don't know their day-to-day lives. No matter how many interviews, how many conversations I do, even I am not a good representative of this community. It has to be these people. And that's why I kind of think that it's extremely important to acknowledge the importance of customary organizations. for example, a fishery cooperative, and not just by, making a cooperative, but giving them a seat at the table where you are taking the decisions. So, for example, when you make a policy or pass a bill, it's about the politicians are there, bureaucrats are there, sometimes researchers, not always, are there, but you wouldn't see like a community member being there. You wouldn't see groups of people from different stakeholder levels being there, being able to say that, hey, this is not going to help, we want it differently, or how are you going to solve the problem that it's going to raise? Are there plans for these? So by empowerment, I simply understand that these people have to have a seat in the table where these debates and conversations are happening.
Yeah. Yes, that's such a good point. It's kind of, it's a conversation between people who are on an equal playing field. And Nadia, how about you? What would your answer be to that question?
So when I read like true empowerment, and it made me want to think like outside of like just as humans, as community. And I think true empowerment can come to us with empathy, which is something that we're losing globally. And then when you have empathy of your surroundings, of the people that are there, no matter if they're in the coastal area or in the city, is when you can generate this empowerment, right? You are acknowledging the different life of someone else, or their different way of living, or their different culture. And I believe we are not doing that. For example, with the fishing community, and when going back to what Alifa said regarding having a seat at the table, still, like many fishermen would tell me, we are isolated. We are not considered in the system. Them being isolated and not having more of a formal education limits their decision-making process, because they do not have the information, right? And so this is not empowering them. This is what Alifa just mentioned. It's like, we are going to tell you what we think is good for you, and that's not. But I do think that things are changing slowly, right? Because we are going into interdisciplinary work, because we are in this empowerment era of coastal communities and all that. I mean, just to say it, but real time is another thing, right? But there is this huge challenge of this integration of people into the table, as into having a space, right? And into really willing to understand their needs. That's the whole point. It's like, are we really willing to understand these needs? Because internationally, the big governments, the big organizations, yes, we have all this idea of decentralization, we have all these laws. Is all this really coming down to reality, to the day-to-day village, to the day-to-day town? I don't think it's coming down. This is not about overfishing and the fishers and the boat. No. This is about who's managing them, who are the buyers, who are the sellers, this is a whole a global scale education that we need. It's not only about the fishers, and we need to raise awareness on these, on the community, on our cities, on our countries. I think the tools are there. I think their policy tools are there. There needs to be funding, yes, but if funding is not coming from the government, then we need to make the change. People, we are 8 billion people. We need natural resources. How are we going to make the change? And how are we going to feel empathy for what's going on?
That was such a beautiful answer. And yeah, and like you said, like you've both said as well, this thing, I think the reason why there's a lot of kind of avoidance and fear around this kind of topic is because it takes a long time, because it is complicated, because it is messy, because you're dealing with humans who are famously not logical and act on emotion, and all of this stuff is all tied into it, and you've got to disentangle that. But I think that's a really beautiful point to sort of end our conversation on, is that basically we just need to treat more situations with empathy. And, you know, for the people who are very much at the center of what you quite rightly said is a more global issue that we all have a role in. It has been such a joy to hear you both talk about your experiences and your knowledge. I could keep you all day. We could talk about this all day, and I'm sure next time we meet we will. But I do have one final question for you, and it is, if you could be any species of shark or ray in the world, what would you be? And why? And Alifa, I know I've put you on the spot with this question before. You don't have to have the same answer.
I think I'm going to stick to the sawfish. I'm sorry I'm so biased. I think the world can use another sawfish, of course, another individual. But then again, I'm just so keen, and all my work, everything that I do started with seeing that rostrum. So it's, I can't believe that I could be anything else. Yeah.
And who doesn't want a saw for a nose?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oh my God. How
cool
that would
be. It's very cool. And you get to live in some of the most beautiful places in the world. So why not? That's I'm fully behind that.
Like the
and Nadia, how about you? What species of shark or ray would you be? Or skate?
We have a new project going on. And it's as if people are not really interested in them, right? They're like medium size, they're not big, not small. They kind of can go in the shade of it, but they're a real shark, but not like, it's just this intermediate thing. And sometimes I'm a bit shy, so I think I would go like unnoticed, being like, and then I could still be in the ocean and do my thing, but not like a big hammerhead or a bull shark or something. I wouldn't want to be too known, so I would just be part of them. Yeah,
you can fly under the radar if you want to.
That's the point.
And then of course there's I think is it black tips, they all like cuddle together like in little holes in the reef, which I think is absolutely adorable. Anyway, I don't want to keep you any longer, just because I'm aware that I'm taking up your time, even though, as I said, I could have this conversation for ages, and there is so much stuff that you have both said that I wish I could go in and ask you about and things, but we will end it there for now, and maybe when we all go on our trip to Bangladesh or Mexico, we can carry on this conversation.
Oh, please. You both should come, we should plan something.
We should all go to Bangladesh, and then you should all come here to the Mexican Caribbean islands, right?
This podcast was brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation. It was hosted and edited by me, Isla Hodgson. Our beautiful artwork is by Nicola Poulos, and the wonderful jingle that you can hear right now is by David Knight. An enormous thank you to Nadia and Alifa for coming onto our podcast and sharing your experiences and your stories from the field. I learned so much from you. If you would like to follow their work, there will be links to everything that they do, all of their social media in our show notes as always, and I would highly recommend that you follow them and follow what they're getting up to, because their research is so fascinating, and I, for one, can't wait to see what they do next. And thank you at home for listening. We always love to hear from you, so if you would like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing isla@saveourseas.com, or you can get in touch on social media. We are at Save Our Seas Foundation on Instagram and at Save Our Seas on Twitter. If you have any topics you would like us to cover in season 4, please do get in touch and let us know. This podcast is for you, for all of you shark nerds out there, so we want to make sure that we're covering everything that you want us to. And this will be the last episode before Christmas. So, as I said at the beginning, wherever you are in the world, I really hope that you are enjoying the holidays, however it is that you celebrate it, and most importantly, getting some well-deserved rest and relaxation. Alrighty, have a jawsome week, and we will see you next time.